Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, I am beyond excited about our show today. We are interviewing Carolyn Mein. Now, I have to preface this by saying I'm so thankful to be the host of the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio because I interview world-leading experts in natural healing. Carolyn Mein and her work has been one of the most profound bodies of work to influence me, both personally and professionally. And if you have tried to diet and lose weight, and that's like a lot of people, and it hasn't worked, then you absolutely need to hear what Carolyn Mein has to say. Now, Carolyn Mein is an internationally recognized author, speaker, and expert on health and nutrition. She is a fellow of the American Council of Applied Clinical Nutrition and a charter member of the International College of Applied Kinesiology. Carolyn Mein has degrees in chiropractic, acupuncture, applied nutrition, and bionutrition. And today we are going to be discussing her very important book, Different Bodies, Different Diets. And there's many different editions of Different Bodies, Different Diets. There's one for men, there's one for women, and one for everybody. You can find out more about Carolyn Mein and her very important work at her website, bodytype.com. Welcome, Carolyn Mein.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Carolyn Mein, would you explain for our audience, what is your 25 body type system?
What I discovered when it came to looking for diet and nutrition is that when I started working with diet books, I noticed that each one would contradict the one that I just put down. And I also found that to just look at what do I need to do that's a basic healthy diet, which we all know, don't eat sugar, don't eat wheat, avoid the soy and the dairy. I found that there were the specifics that were not addressed. And so for me personally, I used a technique of muscle testing as a way of testing to see what was going on with the body. And I found I learned more about diet and nutrition by asking the body than I did by checking various different books and references and so on. The problem is I had blind spots. And so I went through this period like most people do, where you end up going through the health challenges. And so I ended up with a time where I started breaking down my health because I wasn't getting enough protein. And so when I started adding protein back into my diet, then I was introduced to another book that was based on Dr. Beeler's work, and that had to do with the glandular system being the strongest systems of the body. And so when I started doing that and started adding protein back into my diet, but it was more, the book was a validation of what I had personally experienced. And then from there, I started looking at that and thinking, okay, this makes sense because it's based on the glandular system. And we know the strongest glands are the adrenal, the pituitary, and the thyroid. Well, what I was finding is that there were people that didn't fit in those categories, even though there were different characteristics with each particular type. And so one by one, I started discovering that there were additional glands and also organs that could also be a dominant system, and eventually discovered that there were 25 glands, organs, or systems that determines not only what foods support your system, where do you gain your weight, what's your personality, and just a literal owner's manual for the body by looking at the glandular system.
Great explanation. And I have to add my own personal raving fan comments about Carolyn Mein's work and her book, Different Bodies, Different Diets. So originally, I found out about Carolyn Mein's book, Different Bodies, Different Diets, because to my knowledge, my first book was called Healing Depression, a Holistic Guide. It was updated more recently as Banish the Blues. Now that's the updated version of, but my book was endorsed by an enlightened person, Dr. David Hawkins, MD. And the only other book that I'm aware of that Dr. Hawkins endorsed while he was alive was Different Bodies, Different Diets. Well, once I found that out, I thought, I have to go study with this lady. And so I remember years ago taking a workshop, and I have used your work ever since. And I use it for, as you originally intended, when people are trying to figure out, well, what is the right diet for me? And as the host of the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio, I get all kind of books like, you know, when you're 50, you should become a vegetarian and take up running. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is frankly so stupid, right? Because maybe that worked for this one person, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it will work for you. And I remember one time years ago going to a nutritionist who convinced me to become a vegetarian, and I immediately gained 10 pounds. And this was someone with a PhD in clinical nutrition. And yet when I follow Dr. Carolyn Mein's work, then I'm healthy, happy, and so on. So I use Carolyn Mein's work, Different Bodies, Different Diets, both to help people identify what are the best ways for them to eat, what are the best ways for them to exercise, but also, fascinatingly, when I have clients who are trying to figure out what should I be when I grow up, like what career should I follow, I actually used Carolyn Mein's work because different people have, and different human beings have different drives. Now, I have to start by sharing that I'm a lymph body type. And this has also been very important for me personally, because when I was younger, I thought, okay, I'm Phi Beta Kappa from Brown University. I should be on the Supreme Court or something. But knowing that I'm a lymph body types need more movement than anyone else, than any other type. So I'll be 65 next month. I still teach yoga 9 times a week. It's not too much. And I walk my dog and go to the gym once a week. So my body needs more exercise than any other type, and basically constant mental and physical stimulation. So Carolyn Mein, will you share for our audience, what's your body type, and tell us about your body type?
My body type is thyroid. Thyroid's the throat. It's the bridge between the head and the body. And so what that means is take the concepts and ideas and make them practical. Bring that into something that's realistic. And so what I found when I was looking at research, that some people have an idea and they look at information and then they kind of selectively decide what they're going to keep and what they're going to get rid of. And thyroids don't do that. What the thyroid body type does is they have an idea, they have a concept, and then they look at how does that play out. And if it doesn't fit with the concept, they continue to modify the concept until it matches the reality of what's actually happening. And so that is the whole basis of all of my research on the different bodies, different diets, and discovering the 25 different body types. This is all based on clinical research. And so what I would find is I would find certain things that I looked at, this is my theory, and then I would look to see whether that played out. And if I worked with a person and I found somebody where the concept didn't quite fit, I would modify my concept until things would work. That was also what I was doing when it came to the personality profile. Personality profile is the part that I really found to be the most profound, because not only is it the essence of who you are, and so your glandular system, and by glandular system, I'm talking about not only the glands, excuse me, the glands, but the organs and the systems as well. And so lymph is a system. And so that's something that goes throughout the entire body. And so what does the lymph do? The lymph is what cleans the toxins. It's what keeps things moving. And so that's why the lymph body type has got to have physical or mental stimulation or they get depressed.
That's right. And whenever I do feel depressed, if I go for a walk for an hour, then I'm really not depressed anymore. It's like magic for me. Now, again, there's two, and I'm going to give a ringing endorsement here if I haven't already. There are many other systems of body typing. For example, there's metabolic types, there's blood types, but to my experience in 31 years in experience in natural healing, there's no body typing system more accurate and more profound than Carolyn Mein's Different Bodies, Different Diets, because in addition to the personality profile, she also talks to you about what foods work best for you. For example, I love popcorn. I do great on popcorn. Other people, that would be complete junk food. And what are menu plans that work for you? I eat all day long. They say I eat, I eat like a bird all day long. That works really well for lymphs. Does it work well for everybody? So, Carolyn Mein, why is it important for people to understand their body type?
What the body type does is it tells you not only what are the foods that you need to eat to support your system, what time of day do you eat those foods, what about exercise? What time of day do you exercise? For the lymph body type, exercise in the morning is fantastic because it gets things moving. Whereas the adrenal, on the other hand, they're better off exercising later in the day because it releases all of the adrenaline that's been built up from the stresses of the day. And then there's the intestinal body type. And the intestinal body type has this window from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. when they've got the energy to exercise and it's beneficial. Otherwise, it depletes them. And then you have other types where it doesn't make any difference. And so I am one of those. It's like I exercise when I've got time to do it.
Yeah, and I really love that that's part of your system, because there are people like me who think everyone should exercise. It's obvious, but the truth is that other body types, the benefit of exercise may be emotional, right? Or right.
Uh-huh.
In
Yeah.
other words, their body actually doesn't really need a lot of exercise. And
That,
the
that's
other,
it. Yeah. For some people, it ends up being you need it in order to support the immune system. For others, it's the emotional support. And for others, it's I do this so that I can maintain my structure and my strength and my physical endurance. And it also helps as far as shape.
so
So
another aspect of your system that I so appreciate is you talk about dominant drives. So in Carolyn Mein's system, there are 4 dominant drives: intellectual, mental. So you need mental stimulation, physical stimulation of the body, spiritual. So you need spiritual connection. So even people who need spiritual connection when they exercise, they need to do spiritually based exercise, such as yoga, Tai Chi, or Qigong. And then finally, the emotional types. And those need to maybe go to a group class where they're having fun and making friends, right? So
exactly.
when you understand your dominant drives, Carolyn Mein says you have 2 dominant drives. You have to integrate those 2 major aspects of your personality before you can integrate the other aspects. So very profound. And what I find is when you understand your body type, you're going to be physically healthier. You're going to avoid the common health traps of your body type. And by understanding your personality, it'll help you to understand what kind of work should you do? What kind of environment should you live in? And with that, let's take a break and listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors here at UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer. We're listening to Carolyn Mein, author of Different Bodies, Different Diets. So, Carolyn Mein, I think I've established that I'm a raving fan of you and your work, and it's the most comprehensive system that I know of on body typing. How did you develop the 25 body type system?
What I did is I started with the diet information that I could find. So I really looked at all the dietary systems that were out there. Like with the Ayurvedic system, for example, I found that it's a fantastic diagnostic tool, but it really doesn't tell you what am I going to eat for breakfast. And also, I found that there were combinations of types. And this was what I found with every other typing system, is I would see combinations of various different types. And so I ran across a anthropologist who had come up with had another typing system using not only the adrenal, pituitary, and thyroid, and the gonadal that Abravanel had identified for women, but not for men. So I thought that was a little strange. And also, pineal was another type that the anthropologist had developed, as well as pancreas. And when I looked at that, I thought, pancreas is an organ. So if the pancreas can be dominant, then why can't the liver and the spleen? And I had another friend of mine who had a weight challenge, and she said, okay, you're doing all these things with diet. What type am I? So I went through all the various different types, and I couldn't come up with anything. And so then I thought, well, she's an intuitive. And so she picks up a lot of information. How does that end up being? Skin. Skin is the external nervous system. So that was how I discovered the skin body type. And one by one, I kept discovering various different body types. And the last type that I discovered was the eye. And the interesting thing was my father is an eye, and I have a brother that's an eye. So that was the 25th type. It was like things really coming full circle. And so once I discovered that one, that was the last one that showed up. How did I discover it? Clinical. Basically, I would have patients that would come in. I would look to see what fits, what doesn't fit, where's dominant energy, and just really working with the research from that aspect.
I remember years ago figuring out that a gentleman was a brain body type, and we talked about how he should eat and so on. But I said to him, based on your body type, you really ought to be a professor. Well, now he has a PhD and he is a professor. And he's very happy and fulfilled in his work, whereas other people, that might not be the right profession for them. So very profound and life-changing. Now, as you know, Carolyn Mein, the diet industry worldwide is, multi-billions of dollars, and so many people are so frustrated because they can't achieve their ideal size. How does your body system empower people to achieve their ideal size?
What the body type system does is it tells you the foods that support your system. So it's not just, do you want to lose weight? There are also people that have difficulty gaining weight. And I would find in my practice, people would go on these various different diets and they would lose weight. But the moment they went back to eating again, they would put on not only what they lost, but extra to prepare for the next famine. So starvation diets do not work. What you need is you need an eating plan that's going to truly support your system for your entire life, whether you want to gain weight, lose weight, be healthy. And it's good regardless of your age. It's good for children. Where do you start? Because what the diet is what are the foods that truly support your system? And what I found as I went through all the different foods, there really are no bad foods. It's a matter of when do you eat the different ones. And so I've arranged the foods in 3 different categories. One is your frequently, that's kind of your default. You don't know what else to eat. Look at that list. Then we have the moderate. That's the one that you're going to eat 1 or 2 times a week. And so that gives you a lot of variety. And then we've got rarely. Rarely is not never. That's once a month or less. And so then I found when it came to foods, I need to put those in 2 different groups. One is when you're at your ideal healthy state, what are the foods that you can eat? And the other one, if your body is really stressed, what in the world can you still eat? And so we've got 2 parameters. I find people fluctuate more around the healthy. And then from there, you can tailor that to what is it that's going to support you. Because my whole focus with the diet is to teach people to start paying attention to their bodies. Listen to what your body is telling.
Beautiful. Now, is everyone in the same family the same body type?
Rarely. There are 3 body types that do tend to run in families, but the others are usually a combination of the different ones. And an example of some of the ones that tend to run in families, the stomach body type. Spain, the dominant body type in Spain is stomach. And you look at the whole eating pattern and how they end up eating and what they're eating, and it really supports that. Other types, there's the gonadal type that tends to run in families. You see a lot of the gonadal type in Mexico, for example, and also skin is another one that will. Most of the others are combinations of a lot of different types, because a lot of times we look at who are we attracted to, and it's rarely is it somebody that's just like us. It's someone that's a little bit different. And then you look at the family dynamics, because it's interesting to see what body types are attracted to each other and the challenges that we get from being in that environment. And so while we've got 2 aspects that are our strongest system. So for the lymph, it is physical, mental. And so that's why when the lymph body type is stressed, you need to either have physical stimulation or mental stimulation, because that's your strength. That's what grounds you. That's what anchors you. And then the other side is the spiritual and the emotional. And so for the lymph body type, the physical and spiritual are very close as far as where they are. So a lot of times it's hard to even make the definition, but you'll find that by running, you'll get the runner's high, because that allows you to shift from that physical into that spiritual aspect and integrate things. And so what happens in families is we will have, and not just families, but also your work environment and everything else that you're doing, the friends you attract, you find people who express certain qualities very well, and that's how we develop those aspects of ourselves.
Now, just the other week, I identified someone's body type, and she asked me this question: well, does my body type change? And I said no. So can you explain for our audience, why does your body type not change throughout your life?
Your body type is something you're born with. It's like your astrological chart. It's your basic imprint of who you are. It's in your cellular structure. That's your DNA. That's your operating system. And so because that's your operating system, then that's the part that remains the same. Weight gain can change. And so there are certain body types that, depending on where their focus is, the weight gain can change from upper body to lower body. And then also how much weight you have or how much weight you don't have. But your basic core personality, which is who you are, is the part that's consistent. And then the part that changes is how do you express those basic core characteristics? You can express those on the at best side, or you can express those on the at worst side. Generally, what happens is when we're growing up, that's when we explore a lot of the at worst, and hopefully we've learned from that. But for those people who haven't quite mastered it yet, and so this is always degrees, I wrote another book called Releasing Emotional Patterns with Essential Oils. And that's where you can shift that emotion that we would call a negative emotion into what we can refer to as its strength, as the positive side, and have a direction on how to get there. So that's
Well,
how do you really master yourself?
we'll have to have you back on our show to discuss that, right? Now, what is
Absolutely.
involved in the personality profile? Can you explain for our audience what they get out of reading your personality profiles?
Your personality profile is who are you? So it's your basic characteristics, the essence of who you are. It also has to do with your motivation. So what motivates you? We're not all motivated by the same thing. Then if you take those characteristic traits and express those on the at worst side, what does that look like? And then the other side, the at best, what is your potential? And so with your potential, that's all also where's your passion? What is it that gives you that greatest sense of fulfillment? What is it that causes you to grow, to basically be fulfilled? And this is where the question of what am I going to be when I grow up comes in, because if you know what your personality profile is, then you know where your strengths are. So you can go ahead and do something that's gonna fulfill you rather than something that you're constantly struggling with.
Great
And
information.
the interesting thing is because because your body type is present at birth, then that means for parents, the sooner you can identify a child's body type, the more you're able to support that child because you know what they need and what is going to really truly support them to express the totality of who they really are to be able to really maximize their potential.
And going back to our earlier questions about families, what I find is when I do body types that no one in the family is the same body type, right?
That
And
happens a lot.
yes. And so when it comes to meal planning for a family, then part of what we have to do is acknowledge that different people in the family need different meal times, different foods, and we need to honor each other's individuality. And with
And a
that,
good example, oh, okay, a good example of that is we've got the pituitary body type, and the pituitary body type does well to have the majority of their food by 2 p.m. These are the ones that are ideally eat your larger breakfast and lunch and light early dinner and don't do protein in the evening for dinner because they don't digest it well, but they do for breakfast and lunch. And then you've got the adrenal, for example, and the adrenal really doesn't want a whole lot in the morning because if they eat a large breakfast, they're eating all day long, and then they tend to put on a lot of extra weight. And so they can have their larger meal in the evening, dinner time. And so that's usually when they're wanting something that's heavier. So what do you do when dad's an adrenal or a stomach and mom happens to be a pituitary? And so that's when we start looking at meal planning. It's really very simple. Mom just takes the protein that she can't eat in the evening, saves it for breakfast, and eats that in the morning for breakfast. But it is a little bit of a challenge when you're looking at putting things in order.
Great information. And with that, let's take a break and listen to one of our commercial sponsors here at UK Health Radio. You're listening to Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, and we're interviewing Carolyn Mein, author of Different Bodies, Different Diets. So Carolyn Mein, when I'm doing medical intuitive readings, I sometimes, not always, but frequently help identify people's body type in a medical intuitive reading, especially when they're having weight challenges or they can't figure out what shall I be when I grow up, or if they're having specific health challenges, because according to your work, different bodies will have different health challenges. For example, recently I did a medical intuitive reading with someone who had chronic digestive issues, and she was very angry about this. And I was explaining to her, you need to take digestive enzymes pretty much the rest of your life. And she was pretty angry about this. And I explained, well, you're an intestinal body type. This is part of who you are, and this is part of what you are here to deal with, right? And so, can you explain for our audience why different bodies have different health type challenges?
So when you look at the intestinal area, for example, what determines body type is your strongest gland, organ, or system. So for the intestinal body type, it's the intestines that are the strongest area. And so whenever there's stress on the system, it's really the dominant gland that will kind of take things over. And so we've got the adrenals, obviously, that do their part, but then when they've kind of gotten exhausted, then it's the dominant gland that comes in. And when you exhaust that dominant gland, that's when you start seeing health challenges in that particular area. And so health challenges a lot of times will show up as weight gain. That's usually one of the first things that shows up before you start seeing a lot of severe digestive problems. And so this is one of the indicators that you can look for. And then part of this is the nature of the intestinal body type. The nature of the intestinal body type is if they do not expand mentally, emotionally, or spiritually, they will expand physically. And so that's why you need to deal with the emotional aspect as well and support the body physically. And that's where the digestive enzymes are going to be really helpful.
So when I explain to my clients your work about their at worst characteristics, because your personality explains, you know, how you show up when we're how I show up when I'm at my best, and how I show up when I'm at my worst. I refer to that jokingly as like your evil twin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what if someone reads their personality profile and doesn't like their at worst characteristics?
If you don't like your at worst characteristics, you have the power to change those. And that's why I wrote Releasing Emotional Patterns with Essential Oils. And so what that is you look at what's that negative emotion, what's the other side of it, how do I transmute that negative emotion into the positive, which basically equates to how do I move the at worst into the at best.
Now, what are core emotional issues?
And so core emotional issues are those challenges that are associated with your dominant gland and with your body type. So for example, with the lymph body type, a core emotional issue is the fear of being left behind. And where that will show up is I have to be the best. I have to run this race. I have to, and a lot of it is your self-imposed expectations of you. But then you will also see how that can be things that can kind of trip you up as the way that you end up judging yourself.
what is the value of knowing someone else's body type? So again, as a medical intuitive healer, I appreciate your system because there are 25 types. So it's not always easy to go, oh, you're obviously an eye type, or you're obviously a pancreas type. But when you understand other people's body types, how does that help us?
What that does is it helps you understand who that person is, because we look at life based on our own experience. And so what we tend to do is we tend to think that everybody thinks the way we think. And if we explain it to them well enough, they'll get it. It does not work that way. I used to think if I could do something easily, somebody else could do it if they would apply themselves. It does not work that way. You look at where their strengths are. And you're looking at an organization, you're looking at who are you going to hire, you're looking at how do you get along with a particular person, who's your client, how do you speak to that person. All of these things are things that knowing a person's body type will give you the insights and the resources to be able to deal with that person and really help them be the best person they can be.
Again, another thing that I love about your book, Different Bodies, Different Diets, is your photographs of actual bodies. Because in the media, for example, let's just take women's fashion magazines. Let's just take that.
Mhm.
So intellectually, we already know all those photographs have been photoshopped. The photos themselves have been photoshopped, and many of those individuals have had plastic surgery. They've had things cut off, added to. And yet, what I love about your book is it's got photographs of actual bodies. And this is what your body looks like when you're at your best, when you're at your ideal size. And when you gain weight, this is what it looks like when you gain weight. And so I so appreciate that, because I feel in our society, especially with social media, we have unrealistic expectations about what our bodies are supposed to look like. So how can your body type system improve people's relationship and self-esteem, their body confidence?
What it does is it shows you what's realistic. And so you can look at what happens with a particular body type. What happens when they lose weight if they're too thin? What happens if they gain weight? What happens if they gain a lot of weight? What does that look like? So you can come up with something that's realistic. And unfortunately, what happens for girls, particularly in their teens, is they're looking at the magazines and thinking, okay, I'm supposed to look like this gonadal body type. And so what do I have to do in order to do that? And that's when you start seeing the how much weight do I end up losing? And you start seeing starvation areas, or you start seeing the bulimia, or again, you start seeing the plastic surgeries. And then over time, we start seeing the problems that come as a result of even breast implants over the years. And so what this does is it allows you to have a realistic picture of who you are so you can be the best person you can be. I
It,
had
and
I
there's
had
some
an,
body types that are simply larger individuals, right?
there are. And so it's that same area. Look at bone density is another area that's there. And also with the various different types, what's going to be realistic for you? What's going to truly support you?
Now, I have to ask Carolyn Mein, because your system does help empower people to achieve their ideal size. What is your professional opinion of Ozempic and the weight loss drugs that are just all over society these days?
They're they're not natural. And so they don't truly support who you are. It's not like you have a drug deficiency. And the way all drugs work is they clear the energy out of one meridian, but they do that at the expense of another. And there are certain body types, like the lymph body type in particular, that absolutely cannot handle chemicals. And so that's why you need to go organic. There are some other types that can handle processing a certain amount of toxins, but not the lymph.
Yes. And so people who've taken the Ozempic, and I personally wouldn't touch that stuff with a 10-foot pole. You couldn't pay me to do that. If someone has done Ozempic, and I think that's how you pronounce it, or Wegovy, the other weight loss shot drugs, what do they need to do to bring their system back into balance?
First thing you want to look at is more detoxifying your system. And so that comes into start supporting your body and supporting your body not by going into more starvation. Sometimes you can do certain cleanse diets, and the cleanses do have to do basically with the vegetables. What I found is that a prolonged water fast, what will happen is the body will start using its own protein, which is why you can feel really good when you're on a prolonged water fast. The problem is you're using quality muscle tissue, and it takes a lot to rebuild that muscle tissue. So what I find on cleanses is what's ideal is 1 to 3 days and per week, and you could do that every week if you wanted to. And with each particular body type, what I've done is I've gone through sample cleanse diets for each one. And so that cleanse is predominantly vegetables. For some types, it can also have to do with fruit, and the vegetables can be raw, they can be steamed, they can be juiced. It just kind of depends, baked. It just depends on what it is and what's going to work for you.
And final question, Carolyn Mein, how can I use the body type information in relationships? So for example, you're in relationship with your partner or your children. How can that help us?
The relationship part is the part that I find to be so profound, because what it does is it allows you to truly understand who they are and look at where their strengths are. How can you support them? That way you have realistic expectations. You get to the point where you can truly appreciate their strengths rather than expecting them to fit and do things according to your standards and your way of looking at things. And so it helps a lot when you're looking at even how do you attract the person of your dreams. And so by knowing what you're looking for, then you can go through and look at the characteristics rather than trying to look at the external package.
So great information. So going back to the dominant drives, wouldn't it be your advice to find a partner who has similar dominant drives?
Yes, yes. That makes such a difference. Either that, or you understand what that person's strengths are and their drives, and you have an agreement to know this is who you are, this is who I am. What are the areas where we come together? What are the areas where I express my individuality, you express your individuality, and make it okay between the two of you. So the good news is you can really get along with all 25 of the different body types. It's simply a matter of what do you want at this point in your life, and what's going to serve both of you the best at this point.
Great information. Carolyn Mein, as you know, biochemical individuality is one of the fundamental principles of natural healing. So no two people are alike. We all need different kinds of diets, different kinds of exercise. Any final thoughts for our audience?
Well, what the 25 body type system does is it brings things into categories. So let's say, for example, you've got 100% of information. And so if you can divide that into 25 parts, now instead of having to look at 100% of the information, now it's down to something that's realistic. So you can look at this is what your body type is. And then within this information, you can look at where do I fall in this range? How do I personalize that for me to be the best person that I can be? And so this is your owner's manual. It tells you not only what foods to support your system, it also looks at when do you eat the different foods, what time of day, what kind of foods, what combinations, what exercise works for you, personality profile, who are you, what motivates you, where are your strengths, where are your challenges, and gives you a way of just really, truly knowing who you are. The personality profile literally takes 25 years of introspection and condenses it into 4 pages. So it saves a lot of time.
I so appreciate your life work. You've been listening to Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer. I've used Carolyn Mein's work for I don't know how many of my 31 years in natural healing, decades, and I can attest it's very profound, and people are shocked at how accurate it is. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. I'm always referring to Carolyn Mein's website, bodytype.com. So you've been listening to Carolyn Mein, author of Different Bodies, Different Diets. And remember that when you understand what your body type is, you can bring yourself into balance, into happiness, into health naturally. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.